Death at Daisy's Folly. Chapter 21. That Edward, the Prince of Wales, loved Frances Daisy is beyond question. The open recklessness with which he could champion her cause was enough to prove the intensity of his infatuation, but his letters show more than infatuation. They show the depth of growing devotion. Theo Lang, The Darling Daisy Affair. Chatsworth. My darling Daisy, we have an enormous but pleasant party here, though everything reminds me so much of the happy days we spent here 2 years ago. We have had some very pleasant shooting today, many rabbits and some high pheasants. We go to town on Saturday till Monday, and on to Sandringham on the 13th. God bless my adored little Daisy wife. Forever yours, your only love, Bertie. Charles saw Miles to the hallway, then returned to stand beside Kate's chair. He smiled down at her and touched the thick, russet hair piled on top of her head, untidy now after an afternoon's work. Ink smudged her cheek, and there was a matching stain on her index finger, a testimony to the penned notes in front of her. Charles' glance lingered. He thought she made an earnest, pretty detective, and would make an even lovelier wife. He followed with his eye the curve of her shoulders, the rounded swell of her breasts, under the stuff of her dress, the soft waist he felt quite sure was uncorseted. Then, guiltily aware that he was trespassing in dangerous territory and uncomfortably warm with the desire that suddenly coursed through him, he pulled his attention back to the matter at hand. He sat down on the other side of the table, carefully keeping his eyes on her face. "May I hear the results of your inquiry?" he said. "It'll be a short recital," Kate said, and reported what she had learned, adding her surmises at the end. "Of the women," she concluded, "only Malvina Knightley and Lillian Forsyth can provide corroborated accounts of their whereabouts for the entire night. I'm assuming that their statement will be borne out by their companions as they are by their maids. The other women have no alibis. They all had the opportunity to kill Wallace, but of them only Felicia Metcalf seems to have had motive. Jealousy is a powerful passion. It could well have driven her to murder, and she did lie about going to Wallace's room." Teasingly he took her hand. "You speak with authority. Is jealousy a passion you have experienced?" She shook her head. "No, Charles, believe me, please. I have never loved before I loved you." Her face was grave, her hazel eyes truthful, and he flushed, half ashamed of his banter and marveling once again at her honesty and her directness. Most women, schooled in the duplicitous artifice that seemed native to the sex, would have allowed themselves to be reluctantly coaxed to a coy admission of their former lovers. Then her lips curled in a smile humorously teasing in its turn. "Of course," she added, "jealousy is Bill Bartwell's stock in trade. To take away jealousy as a motive for her various murders would be like stealing crimson from an artist's palette." He laughed too, delightedly. "Very well then, let us assume on the irrefutable authority of Beryl Bartwell that Lady Metcalf's jealousy could have driven her to shoot Wallace." Kate reclaimed her hand, becoming serious. "Actually, Charles, it would not have been easy for any lady to shoot the man, at least as we've reconstructed the crime." "Indeed?" He was surprised. "You don't think a woman emotionally capable of such a criminal act?" "Of course I do," Kate said firmly. "The female of the species can be even more deadly than the male given sufficient provocation, but we have established, have we not, that Wallace was seated when he was shot. I observed at luncheon yesterday that whatever else he was, the man was unquestionably a gentleman. I doubt that he would have remained sitting in the presence of a lady, of any lady," she repeated, "especially one that he had disappointed. A consciousness of guilt would have brought him to his feet almost immediately." Charles stared at her dumbfounded. "Of course," he exclaimed, wondering why he had not thought of this small but not insignificant bit of information. "I myself know how impossible it is to sit in the presence of a standing lady. The body simply assumes the orthodox attitude with or without the mind's consent. So," he added, "it is a man that we are looking for." Thinking of Daisy, he felt inordinately relieved. I should think so, Kate said, but I don't believe we can rule out the possibility that a woman, particularly one with whom he was on friendly terms, might have bidden him to sit down. In any event, it is something that we must consider going forward. Charles nodded, feeling a swiftly increasing respect for Kate's keen intelligence and reflecting, in a kind of mute celebration, that he could not have been more blessed in his choice of a wife if he searched the length and breadth of England. Kate was continuing. Verena Rochdale might have had the opportunity, although you must ask Isaacson whether he was with her last night, as Ellie suggests. But Verena appears to have known Wallace only in society. I could uncover no relationship between them and no motive that night that might have compelled her to kill him. And speaking of Ellie, I fear it's impossible for me to believe that she had anything to do with the man's death. If you think otherwise, you must speak with her and draw your own conclusions. And the servants? I learned nothing from them that either amplified or contradicted their mistress's stories. Kate glanced at Charles and added, I have not yet talked to Lady Warwick. I thought you might wish to join that conversation. Perhaps it would be best if we saw her together, Charles nodded. Before then, we should have a look at Wallace's room, and on the way I will tell you what I learned from the farrier. But first, he took her hand once again, lay in his, small and inexpressively precious, though it was ink-stained. You have had no second thoughts, Kate. About our marriage? Her glance was direct and clear, nothing reserved. None. Have you? I am surer now than ever before, he said, standing. He pulled her to her feet and into his arms, kissing her with a sudden burst of passion that nearly unnerved him, and, he feared, must have frightened her slightly. Overtaken by a rush of desire to possess her that he hardly knew how to quell, he stepped back and dropped his hands to his sides. How soon can we be married? He asked, thinking that even a few days' delay would be much too long. She looked down, then up at him again. I fear I do not know what is customary, Charles. What would your family expect? He frowned, remembering Robert's wedding in St. Paul's Cathedral, a protracted, ponderous affair which had required the attentions of a battalion of clothmakers, seamstresses, flour merchants, bakers, caterers, and coachmen who had been remunerated through the sale of thousands of acres belonging to his sister-in-law's father. He remembered the month of negotiations over the marriage settlement, the contentious arguments between the fathers of the groom and of the bride, the prolonged debates over terms and allowances. What my family expects is of no relevance to us, he said firmly. My brother's marriage was the social event of the year, attended by half a dozen minor royals. Your family could hardly spare the time or effort just now to be involved with an elaborate wedding, Kate said thoughtfully. They might even wish us to wait until after the year's mourning is done with. Wait? Not if I have anything to say about it. Kate touched her finger to his face, tracing the line of his brow. A year is much too long, I think, she said softly. Charles put his arms around her once again. Then perhaps we could induce Barfield to marry us without ceremony, he said, his lips against her fragrant hair. Next week, perhaps. Barfield Tappert, with whom Charles was well acquainted, was the vicar of the parish where Bishop's Keep was located. I will speak to him myself as soon as the weekend is over. He snapped his fingers. No, by heaven, I shall straightway send off a telegram. Kate's eyes grew large. Charles, I hardly think. A fortnight, he shook his head urgently. No longer than that, surely. No longer, Kate, please. Let us speak more on this later, Charles, she said. You have an urgent commission to resolve matters here. When you have satisfied the prince, then we can settle the details of our wedding. She stood on the tiptoe to kiss him lightly. I promise you, my dear, it will not be long. Charles took her hand and kissed it, feeling that he loved her far more than he could ever say. Well then, he said with a deep sigh, the sooner we are done, the sooner we can begin our happiness. So, let us get on with this murderous business and have it over with. Shall we go to Wallace's room? Kate nodded. Have you spoken to his manservant yet? His manservant? No, it hadn't occurred to me. Well then, Kate said, why don't we ring for the house steward and ask him to send Wallace's servant to the room? We can interview him there. Of course, Charles said, wondering once more why he had not thought of that. Wallace's bedroom was on the second floor, Kate discovered as she accompanied Charles up the central staircase. They went into the west wing down a long hallway where Charles pointed out the room where he himself slept. Rooms for single men were designed for sleeping and dressing, it appeared, and were a lot smaller, less elegant, and much more Spartan than the ladies' rooms. As they approached Wallace's room, they saw Kirk Smythe stationed outside the door, speaking with a young girl, a laundry-maid, it appeared from her basket. Kirk Smythe's arms were folded, and he was shaking his head adamantly. "Sorry, miss," he said. "No one comes into this room until the investigation is finished. Orders of His Highness." The girl gulped. "But 'tis my job to get the sheets through the washing," she replied desperately. "For I don't Miss Washbottle'll sack me. She counts everything down to the last pillowcase." "It's all right, Kirk Smythe," Charles said. "Hello, Meg," he said. The girl jerked around. "Sir?" she asked apprehensively, then appeared to recognize Charles. "Sir!" she exclaimed, seeming, oddly, Kate thought, even more frightened. From the name, Kate recognized her as the farrier's daughter of whom Charles had spoken on their way upstairs. "It's not likely that Lord Wallace's bed was slept in last night, Meg," Charles said in a kindly tone. "And if it were, it won't be slept in tonight. The laundering can wait." The girl's chin trembled. "But that won't satisfy Miss Washbottle," she said, half choked. "She'll still want them done." Mrs. Washbottle, Kate thought, seemed a bit unreasonable, and it was odd that the upstairs maid, who was responsible for the rooms in this corridor, had not already remade the bed. But Charles was smiling at the girl in a kindly way. "Well then," he said, "you may go into the room and get the sheets if you must." Kirk Smythe took out a key, unlocked the door, and the girl slipped inside as if a wolf was snapping at her heels. "Am I to wait?" he asked. Charles shook his head. "Oh, the prince asked me to send you to the library, where some telegrams are to be dispatched. I was asked to tell you that His Highness is also about to exhaust his supply of cigars." Kirk Smythe seemed to linger. "About last night, Sheridan." He shifted uncomfortably, and his eyes went to Kate, a red flush creeping along his jaw. "His Highness being otherwise occupied, you see, I was giving leave to, pursue my own interest. A certain young lady and I—" He hesitated, his mouth twitching. "That is to say—" "Celia has already spoken to me about your meeting last night," Kate said gently, "and I have relayed her account to Sir Charles." "Then you know what transpired." The young man was visibly relieved. "Celia is a lovely girl, and I mean to marry her if she will have me. In fact, I plan to ask His Highness to intercede on my behalf." His face darkened. "But Lady Rochdale is a damned termagant, if you don't mind my saying so. If she knew that her daughter and I—" "Lady Rochdale will know nothing from us," Charles said. "Did you see or hear anyone in the vicinity of the Folly last night?" Kirk Smythe shook his head. "As the Prince Guard, I assume you carry a gun." Kirk Smythe lifted his trouser leg, reached into his boot, and pulled out a small, deadly-looking derringer. He handed it to Charles. "I have had it on my person since His Highness and I arrived at Easton." Charles turned the gun over in his hand, opening the breech and examining the cartridge in the chamber. "A .41 caliber, he remarked. "Correct. Has the fatal bullet been recovered?" Charles returned the gun. "Yes, it was fired from a smaller weapon, .32 caliber, most likely." "Ah," Kirk Smythe said, and slipped it back into his boot. He straightened and handed the room key to Charles. "I should see to those telegrams now," with a half bow to Kate, and muttered, "Ma'am." He went quickly toward the stairs. Charles pushed the door open, and Kate followed him into the room where the girl was stripping the bottom sheet from the bed to add to the pile on the floor. The room was high-ceilinged and dark, with a dark green wool rug on the floor and heavy green damask draperies over the window. Kate went to them and pulled them open to allow light into the room. Turning, she saw a bed against one wall, a large barrel-fronted mahogany dresser against another, and a fireplace with a white-painted mantel-shelf let into a third. A small writing table sat beside the window, and with it a carved wooden chair. A more comfortable upholstered chair in green, with a small oak footstool, was placed beside the fireplace. "What are we searching for?" "I don't know," Charles admitted, looking around. Anything that might provide a clue as to the motive of Wallace's murder." He went to the dresser and began to pull out the drawers. There was a soft knock at the door, and Kate went to it. A frock-coated manservant was standing stiffly outside. "I'm Richard's, ma'am, Sir Reginald's valet." He glanced at the open drawer in which Charles had been searching. "You are the gentleman commissioned by His Highness to investigate Sir Reginald's murder." "I'm Charles Sheridan, and this is my assistant, Kate Ardley." He stepped aside to allow the girl to leave the room with her basket of sheets. "Please accept our condolences on the death of your master, Richards." Richards inclined his head, and the starchiness went out of him. "Thank you, sir. If there's anything I can do, you have but to ask." Poor Sir Reginald, he swallowed. "Well, sir, it's a dreadful shame, is all I can say. Appalling is what it is." "It is indeed a great pity," Charles agreed sympathetically, as Kate went to the writing table. Upon it was a clock, a green blotter, an inkwell, a collection of pens, and a leather portfolio filled with clean sheets of heavy vellum embossed with the Eastern seal. She raised the blotter, which appeared to be clean. There was nothing under it, and nothing in the drawer. "I wonder," Charles was saying, "whether you know of anyone who might have borne ill will towards Sir Reginald." The man's face hardened. "As a matter of fact, sir," he said, "I do." Kate turned surprised, and Charles asked, "Who?" "Sir Thomas, sir," Richards said with much feeling. "Thomas Cobb?" Charles asked, his eyebrows going up. "Sir Thomas was Reginald's wife's father, sir. There had been bad blood between them since Lady Wallace died. Sir Thomas, you see, believed, quite wrongly, I assure you, that his daughter was murdered." "Murdered?" Kate exclaimed. "Yes, madam." Richard's lips thinned. "By Sir Reginald." Charles mulled this over. "I see," he said presently. "Have you ever heard Sir Thomas threaten Sir Reginald?" Richard became earnest. "Oh, several times, sir. They quarrelled often and hard and heatedly. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, just here. Sir Thomas's room is down the hall, you'd see, and he stopped on his way to dinner." Of course, Kate thought. That explained why Sir Thomas, who had been seated beside her at dinner, had spent the entire meal glowering across the table at Sir Reginald. Had the unmistakable animosity between the two men blossomed into something much deadlier? "How did Sir Thomas suppose his daughter's death to have taken place?" Charles asked. "Lady Wallace was injured when she and Sir Reginald were out riding, sir." "Ah, yes," Charles murmured. "I recall something about a fence." "Indeed, sir," Richard said. "Her horse refused the fence, and she was thrown against a tree. She survived for several days, unable to speak. Sir Thomas was most distraught. He charged that Sir Reginald had struck his daughter." "And the supposed motive?" Richards dropped his chin into his high starch collar. "At the time, Sir Reginald was on friendly terms with Lady Warwick." Kate shivered. Under the circumstances, it was perhaps not surprising that Sir Thomas had accused his son-in-law, or that he glared at him across the dinner table. More surprising, actually, was that the two men had agreed to come to the same house party. Was something to be made of that fact? She was glancing around the room, wondering where to search next, when her attention was caught by a folded paper on the floor beside the bed. She went to pick it up. Charles was going on with his questioning. "Setting Sir Thomas aside, Richards, are you aware of anyone else who might have wished your master harm?" Richards pushed his lips in and out. "One does not wish to speak ill of a lady," he said carefully, "but Lady Metcalfe, that is to say—" He stopped, looking very uncomfortable. Kate stepped forward. "She was infatuated with your master, was she not?" she asked. "Perhaps embarrassingly so." "Yes, thank you, madam," Richard says. "That is exactly the case, I fear. Lady Metcalfe made Sir Reginald's life an outright misery. She lives only 3 miles away, you see. She's always coming to call, and even invites herself to dinner, and when he tried to suggest to her, in a most gentlemanly way, mind you, that he wished to be let alone, she fell into an extraordinary fit in front of the servants." He shook his head, clucking reproachfully. "She was a great humiliation to him, and eventually he was forced to advise her of his feelings. I'm sorry to say so, but the lady might have wished to avenge herself, a woman scorned." "Thank you," Charles said. "Can you think of anyone else?" Richard seemed to be about to speak, then closed his mouth. "If you have thought of anyone," Charles said, "anyone at all, I should be most grateful for your opinion." Richard sighed. "I do hate to say it, sir." "I'm sure, Richards. These things are never pleasant. Who is it that you have in mind?" "Lord Warwick, sir." Kate was not surprised at all by this. Love affairs seemed to be taken lightly by the Marlborough set, but there must have been some strain between Lord Warwick and his wife's former lover. She fell into a bemused wonderment, thinking in what complicated menage of relationship the Warwicks lived. Lady Warwick, her husband, her former lover, Wallace, her present lover, the Prince of Wales. It would be remarkable if Lord Warwick did not have a lover too, she thought suddenly. If so, Who was she? Lady Lillian, perhaps? I see, Charles was saying. Did Lord Warwick and Sir Reginald have words, Richards? Yesterday, sir. Lord Warwick seems to have believed that Sir Reginald had possession of a letter belonging to Lady Warwick. Oh, but he was wrong, sir, he interjected. Sir Reginald would not have lowered himself to steal a lady's letter. Perhaps it came into his possession by some other means, Charles said. Can you report any particulars of the conversation? I'm afraid not, sir. Lord Warwick was quite unspecific in his charges, except to say that he feared that the Warwick name would be damaged, and Sir Reginald denied knowing anything of the letter. I must say, sir, he added, that Sir Reginald bore himself like the gentleman he was, even under Lord Warwick's intemperate attack. Well then, is there anything else? Richard thought for a moment, then shook his head. No, sir. Thank you then, Richard. I believe that will be all. When the man had left the room, Kate held out the folded paper. I found this on the floor beside the bed, Charles. It must have fallen from the sheets when the maid pulled them off. Charles took it from her and unfolded the paper and began to read. My darling Daisy, we have an enormous but pleasant party here, though everything reminds me so much of the happy days we spent here 2 years ago.